We are live.
Okay. Thank you, Mrs. DeGrosse. We'll go ahead and call our work meeting to order this morning. I want to thank all of you for being here. Mr. Burtonshaw is not going to be able to join us today. The floor will be open for a motion to approve the agenda.
Madam Chair, I make the motion we approve the agenda.
Second.
Those in favor of approving the agenda?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. Thank you. Okay, we'll jump right into the policy. We're on the 3000 series.
Madam Chair, you can see in the handouts that you have, and I'm going to go ahead and share the screen as well. On that, just to pull it up so those that are listening in at home. And this is a work meeting just for those that are joining us at home. Work meeting. Hold on a second, make sure that.
Is your mic off?
Let me see.
Turn your mic off and mute.
All right, I'm muted now. There we go.
Much better.
Thank you. I knew I could hear something. I just wanted to make sure it was going that right. So difference between, just for those that are watching at home, between a work meeting and a regular meeting. This is going to be more boring probably for those that are at home. The whole purpose of this is that as a board, we have a chance to sit down and discuss the policy and the different things that are on the agenda. And no decisions are made today. It's just discussion. So you can see in the packet that I handed you out, there's a table of contents, and you'll notice that on that table of contents that there are highlighted areas. I can still hear something here.
Is the TV's volume on?
That's probably what it is. Turn that one down.
See it.
This was happening last time as well. So I'm just going to talk here just for a second and you'll hear it right now. As Mrs. DeGrasse looking at that, I'll just visit with you guys. It's not a TV production. This is not supposed to be a. So the highlighted ones are the ones that are required by law. And you can see that as all of those, as ISBA, they're not saying that we have to have all of these policies. What they're doing is they're providing us with sample options of those. And so I looked at a couple of other districts and they've done it a couple of different ways. And we've mentioned this on when we did the 3000 series. There are some districts that only have the yellow highlighted ones and that's all they have. But that doesn't mean that they don't have procedures in place. There are some that have a mix between the yellow and the non-required ones. And I noticed on Idaho Falls School District's website, they have a folder that says administrative procedures. And you'll find that the ones that aren't yellow are still addressed. So the difference between that would be we're looking at governance from a board perspective. And if you recall back to a year ago when we had our training, one of the main roles of a board member is to establish policy. And that gives the board members really the direction where it says, okay, here's the policy and go in that direction. The second one would be the superintendent working with me, working with the goals of the district on the strategic plan. Those types of goals are what guide the governance from this body. And it's interesting because as I look through this list, the ones that aren't yellow, there's a few of them who talks about like student government, student publications. Would those necessarily have to be a school board decision, or could that be an administrative procedure? And so the difference between that is anything that's policy goes through this body, and it has to have 2 readings and takes, I don't want to say it takes a lot of time, but it takes considerable amount of time and bureaucratic work to do that. Whereas if we would like to take our process and identify the ones that are first and foremost required by law, make that our established group that we start with, and then have another folder, as you could say, that have the administrative procedures. And those are things that myself, the high school administration, and the teacher leadership teams could get together. They could make the discussions on what should we have these things look like. And then those changes could be made without having to come back to the board, go through 2 readings and so forth.
It'll simplify.
The pros and cons would be, a pro would be yes, that would simplify.
Mhm.
A con, if depending on what your viewpoint as a board member is it takes a little bit, one could say that it takes control out of the board, but with the ones that are required by law. So I don't know, I agree with you, Willie, that it would simplify.
Yeah, anything simple is better.
So you picked these things here.
So these that are
No,
highlighted,
These are by state law, isn't
No,
that
the
right?
highlighted
The
ones are
highlighted
the-
ones?
the highlighted ones are what ISBA sent to
Oh, what
us.
Oh.
ISBA said.
Oh, okay,
The highlighted is what they said was required.
Okay.
required.
Okay.
So as part of this review process that ISBA is helping us with, they're saying these are the ones that are required by law. And then it's,
And the others we still have to do, but it can be handled without.
Yeah, administrative.
Well,
so I guess first and foremost, we can just, for this meeting, let's read through it and just go through and just hear your opinions and say, well, why is that one? Why is that not? And I
so
would,
we can add,
oh, absolutely.
Okay.
It's just up to you guys.
we just can't take away. Okay.
Yeah, you just can't take away the highlighted ones. So that's kind of what I think we start off with, just going through on this first one, since it is a work meeting. And then I propose taking at least a half an hour to 40 minutes on this section. Just going through and then going back and looking to see what they're saying. So I'll let you get your glasses out, Nedra.
No, I just gonna spray my hands down.
So I'm thinking through your
I left my glasses home. I've got one good eye that can see short and one that sees long, so.
Well, then they're covered.
So I don't know, any other thoughts on how you want to go through this? Because it's really our time. Do we want to pull up entrance, placement, and transfer? Because in the big packet that you have right next to you is an example of each of the highlighted ones. I did not get you, and it should be front and back. It didn't
Yeah,
copy
it is.
correctly. Okay.
If they're required, I feel like our hands are tied. Why are we gonna read through them?
So they're still required to have, but we have some flexibility in some of the verbiage. And so ISBA will go back if we change a verbiage, maybe to clarify, because there are some that are required on the other side. It's just required to have a policy on that, but it doesn't have to be exactly what.
This is kind of like a template for you to use to make your policy,
Okay.
but you can alter it. One of the requireds is suicide. And in preparation for this meeting, I did have Mr. DeGraw look at the policy that was written, and he's made some notes for you guys to look at and consider. So that's kind of what you're doing, is you're looking at a template and deciding how you want it to be implemented in our district.
So if you look at 3,000, for example, and it just has the entrance date, these are right from state law, the initial enrollment. It's pretty cut and dry, straightforward with it. If you look at like 3010s, I don't have them in here, but I can pull them up. Let me pull them up as well. because there's going to be some enrollment forms and just different things that can guide it. I know in my previous district where I worked, they did have some details in there on protecting programs. For example, the special ed program at my previous district, they had a list to say this is how many students can come in, and it limited outside students that lived outside of the area from coming in. Now that it's one of those things that it has to be well defined and backed up, but we could put in that our class sizes will only be to this level. And so if we have a mid-year out of district person wanting to come in, and we already have 25 kids in our 4th grade class, we could say, based off our policy, we can't let you in right now.
We have to limit our numbers.
And we haven't done that, at least in the 2 years that I've been here. We've been trying to get as many people in as possible. And I don't have the current numbers of out of district students. I know last year we had 110 out of our 590 that were out of district. And so when you look at that, that's just around 20%, you know.
Except mostly Roberts and Du Bois.
It's Du Bois and Roberts would probably be the highest.
We probably have a few come from Howe, right?
Oh, hell.
And so that's one that we can look at. And again, today's meeting is not to, you know, to go through and make all the changes, but that's just what it is.
Of course, we'd never want to, if a person had been going here and then we get a full grade, we'd never want to say you can't come here still.
I know. I know the only, I think the things that we want to put in there are, and we already have them on our applications, about if students who are out of district, if their attendance is failing or they're just not getting here, or if students are not adhering behaviorally, you know, those students can be, that I guess that the invitation for them to come can be revoked.
Is
on
that written in here somewhere?
I haven't looked through these yet. I wanted to first start the day off with just, let's find out where we're going to focus in on, and then I think that would be something that between now, next meeting, you know, this policy process may take additional meetings as well. Sorry, guys.
I can imagine it would.
With everything. So as we go through this list, entrance and placement, the open enrollment procedures, part-time attendance, compulsory attendance, I think a lot of these are going to be straightforward. I'm just going to keep reading down. Education of homeless children, that's part of federal programs.
Thanks, sir. Current non-resident application.
We don't really have any out-of-state, when you look at 3080, out-of-state students, because we're not a border district, but that happens in several different ones. There's one in, I remember hearing from one of my superintendent meetings from Owyhee County, down in the southwest corner. There are kids that live in Idaho, but they're only like 4 or 5 miles away from a Nevada school. And so then the purpose of that is just to make sure that Idaho then sends Nevada the money for those students, and vice versa if a student came across. The sexual harassment policies, Title IX procedures, I think all of these would fit very well in a procedural file on that where,
As long as we know they're being dealt with. Sometimes if it's not policy. I don't know.
and sometimes if there's too many policies, it's hard to know what's even there. I've kind of experienced that my first year and a half here as superintendent. And it's funny because it's like you get hired one day and everyone's like, hey, what's the policy on this? I'm like, I'm still learning. Still learning all these.
I'll quote
But
that.
but the policies are, I don't know, sometimes they're like, well, when did that policy come in? and it was 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Maybe some of them were from 85.
That's why they have to be updated.
That's why they have to be
Some of
updated.
those policies could be obsolete
Now, what I'm wondering is,
by then.
you know how the state office is updating policies? Has this been updated by them?
By the which
By the,
office?
by the
ISBA.
ISBA?
Yes, this is the most recent one.
This
Carrie,
is-
you talked to ISBA. What did they tell you about this update?
So the process of this is you guys did the 2000 series before the pandemic.
Mhm.
I turn in what you guys chose, and April reviews it and her staff reviews it.
Mhm.
Once it's been approved, then they send us. So they sent us every template for all of the 3000 series that you're seeing on your table.
Mhm.
And then she also attached a list of what's required by law. And so then I went through the table of contents and just highlighted those in yellow.
But what I'm wondering is, have they updated these?
Yes, so they're constantly updating the templates. So she said these are brand new
These are
as
brand
of,
new, okay.
the middle of December.
Okay.
So maybe we just, I don't know, how the best way to do this. Just take some time and read through the 3000 and see if there's anything that jumps out at us.
Well, I'm mostly concerned about the ones that aren't highlighted. Should they be or should they not?
Let's do that then. Let's go through that first. And go down through and see if we need to put anything on there. So we'll start off, let's start at the top, entrance, placement, transfer. Statement of guiding principles, that's just a nice thing to put in there to say, this is our principles for it, but is it really necessary?
Okay, so if we don't put things in, they are still in the policy book.
They can be
Or
put in the
not.
policy.
They can be. So ask that question again, let me see if I'm understanding.
So if they're not gonna become policy, they're just gonna be procedures. Is there a policy book and a procedures book?
Yes,
And they're separate?
yes.
Okay, so they're not required if they're not policy.
Okay.
So the procedures would be dealt with like administratively.
Yes. And so the procedures would still govern, it's just procedures can be altered as needed. Like you'll still want to establish them and follow them. And but it allows like dress code, for example, which is one that's on here, student dress.
Okay.
Should that really be something that we establish, but we don't govern? For example, like you could, I guess if that's really what the direction that the board wanted to do. But if we put into policy that shorts have to be exactly 2 inches above the knee,
That never works.
and you know how that works, then what that means is if the teachers and administration aren't following policy, then
Then they're breaking.
they're
policy.
breaking policy.
Okay.
And do we really want where, then if they wanted to change it to say, well, there's a new fad and the ripped jeans are here, and because we've had policy in our district that says no ripped jeans
Mhm.
or no holy jeans. If you walk through the high school right now, you're going to see that. So we're essentially not breaking policy. But if you want, and if that's so important to you, the climate that's going to create to force our administrators and teachers to follow that, it's not worth it.
Mhm.
It's not worth the fight that you're gonna have. And that essentially happened 2 or 3 years ago. The year before I came in, I was talking to the administrator the summer when I was first hired. And they felt like the year before that, they were fighting so hard to not have the holy ripped jeans. And my advice to them was, why are we fighting that right now? Don't we want, if it's not showing underwear or, the private parts, like, but that shouldn't be something that, the 5 of us are discussing. There's no real teachers. And by the time we went through an entire process where we have student feedback, teacher feedback, just for this one policy could take us 3 to 4 months by the time it comes to readings and everything else.
Mhm, okay.
But if it's in a procedure manual, you can have your student council start a conversation in a class.
Yeah.
The principal could come in during that time. They could make some changes to that and say, okay, we're putting this in the student handbook. Boom, here we go. Here's our procedures.
That's what okay, so that makes sense to me to have two different.
And the
sets of-
other thing is you could give direction to the superintendent. We want these things put in policy. Can you please make sure that your administrator puts these things in procedure, I mean?
Yeah.
So if you're concerned about something being implemented, if it's not in policy, you guys can give direction to Shane to bring
Yeah.
that to,
It could
The
go up
administrators.
and back down that way.
So who would ultimately approve or deny that? Would,
The procedure,
yeah, would
it'd
you?
be me.
I just like that there's a couple of checks, like principals and you are
Yes.
both, you know,
Yes, the how that would work is the administrative team, which would be the superintendent, it would go up and down that way. But then that way it just doesn't have to come back to be approved through the policy process. So let's look at the ones, we could add a compulsory attendance prosecutor letter form. I don't even know, so I don't know if we need to put that into policy. Just moving forward. I'll just read these out loud, and if there's some that you feel like that we might want to. Attendance policy. That's an alternative.
Do we have, we're not so much on attendance anymore.
With this year with COVID,
No.
no, we're not.
What kind of a policy is that? What does it have in it? Does it say
On that one,
you can only miss so many
yeah.
days? Because I think
Yeah.
that's outdated.
And those would be ones I think a procedure would work just fine
Mhm.
with that. And the thing about attendance in Idaho, where before this school year, attendance, one, yes, it's really important that kids are here. I agree with that.
Mhm.
But then your funding is driven by attendance,
Which has got to stop.
which this year, unless the legislature changes it completely, they've granted it on attendance, which actually would benefit our district since our enrollment went up. And it's interesting because you look at
Do you mean on enrollment then?
enrollment, our enrollment went up.
Okay, so they don't do it on attendance, they do it on enrollment.
No, they do it, but last year was attendance.
Attendance, but this year.
This year, they changed the rule, but it's not 100% because they've talked about it 2 or 3 different times, and the legislature could change it and go back to attendance in March. That's what we're dealing with, is the rules change,
Yeah.
and they've changed this last year with COVID 2 or 3 different times. So we're crossing our fingers. I hope that for us, as long as they don't change the multipliers and the divisors for the funding, I think that's going to be the thing that's going to be the key. But for 2020, 21, this year with COVID, our enrollment went up. And when you look at a lot of the, there was an article in Idaho Ed News in the last week that's saying that there are 3,500 less students in Idaho. What they're talking about is public school, in-school students. Like a lot of them have moved to online or homeschool formats
Oh.
because of COVID. And so on one hand, you'll see that and people will say, oh, we're losing students. Why are we going to fund more? As soon as they open the schools back up, it's just going to climb. And so that's where those are at. So attendance by out-of-state students, sexual harassment, discrimination, retaliation policy, not required.
Well,
Well, wouldn't that be better to be done
I'm
administratively,
thinking most of these are.
Because that one, it could have a lot of different things
as long as
that
there's
could be
some-
dealt with
As long
locally
as
better.
there's something there.
As long as there's some recourse for somebody
Yep.
that feels they have grievance.
And I'm thinking that, like, if we initially do this, we take all of the non-requireds and start off and put them into a procedural one.
Mhm.
And then that allows us to just work through it. And that's something that I can work through with the administrative team, again, without going back to a board vote. on there. Exchange students, programs for at-risk disadvantaged students, students' rights and responsibilities. You know, that again, that fits so much more into a procedural one.
Yep.
Student use of buildings, equal access. Carrie, when you talked with ISBA, did they say what usually made things mandatory? What distinguished the ones that were here from the ones that were yellow? It's
The
just,
yellow one.
is it federal law that kind of does that?
It's either federal or
Because
state.
all of these have a state law to them.
Right, when she sent it to me, she actually had to take a day or two, which is atypical for April. But she said that there were changes that had just been made. And so she had to get the latest update. So I'm not sure who's making those decisions. But I do know that this is the list that she
But it would
sent.
probably be either state or federal law
Correct.
requiring it.
Requiring, so there are laws connected to all of these, but there are laws that dictate what you must have in policy.
Yeah, and you still have to follow state and federal law regardless of whether you have a policy or not.
But I think the reason that they're required in policy is because we want to make sure that we have clear boundaries set within those specific areas.
So student government, student publications, posting materials, student dress, technology, student-owned electronic communication devices. These are all things that can be governed through the school. District provided access to electronic information services and networks. That's one that will be required that we will look at. When you see the PF, those are usually just different forms. They're the same thing, but they just look into that. So we could probably pull those up as well if we're looking at do district provided mobile computing devices allowed to take home, not allowed to take home. I might want to look at that one.
Do we allow the students to take the Chromebooks home?
Mhm.
We do, don't
We
we?
do.
They have to sign a release
A
form.
release form.
From 7th grade up, right?
And then we have an
Yeah.
insurance program to cover
We
any,
do not have insurance.
to
What
cover
we have
repairs.
is a deposit, like a kind of like a security deposit kind of thing that they can pay. But it is not insurance.
Okay.
So I'm gonna start that one, the allowed to take home, because I want to just make sure that since we're doing that, to see if it's something that looking a little bit more. Would be nice. The second page. And if there's any one that we want to star, I'll do that as well. Or just let me know.
I want to look at the student-owned electronic communications devices.
Student-owned electronic devices, okay? Okay. So we have 3280, which is required, equal education. The next one, gender identity, is 3281. Relationship abuse, prevention and response, sexual harassment, intimidation of students, harassment reporting form for students. I'm curious the difference between the 3290, the harassment form, and there's another form up under. So with Title IX, there are new, I'm going back to 3085. There are procedures in place with the new requirements for Title IX, with investigation. If you remember last year in our board meetings, I came up with the investigation process. I'm curious if that falls under this. And so I'm just gonna, for my sake, look at those just to see if it's similar. Bully Awareness Week, not required. Drug-free zone, prohibition of tobacco, smoking, substance, student discipline, academic honesty is not, but that would be one that could fall right in with the procedures, corrective actions and punishment, use of restraint, seclusion, and aversive techniques for students, detention,
There's use of restraint.
a lot of that,
That could get you in trouble
yeah,
if you don't have a firm,
let me look into that one a little bit
firm
more.
policy on that.
Yeah. Better have a good policy on that or you open yourself up to litigation.
I would think so.
We'll put a. So the discipline of students with disabilities, that's steeped really heavily in special education law. Just that outlines the specific amounts of and types of discipline that can take place. Student sex offenders, searches and seizures.
Well, that student sex offenders, that kind of moves into law enforcement, local law enforcement investigating that.
Yeah,
Anything that we would want to put in policy will be governed by the law.
the
Local-
the
local law.
and the procedures will too.
You know, if a student is a sex offender,
Mhm.
then
Yeah.
there will be, the parole officer and all those other things will govern all those things. I don't know that we want to try and supersede any of that.
No.
So as I'm looking down through there with they have some extracurricular and participation forms, but I'm looking at one that we've traditionally done, been involved with as a board, 3420 student fundraising activities. That's been one that we've been involved
I'm gonna
with.
read that one.
Do we want, yeah, let me just go there, put a question mark by it to see if that's what if we want to continue being involved with that or not. Student fees, fines, charges, return of property, I think that's more procedural. Parking. School-related foreign travel by students. We might, since we do have groups that have done that, we might want to look at that from a district level.
Mhm.
Because that might indicate that if it's a club, then it excludes the district from being involved in that. Student protection is the next heading. Student health, physical screenings, examinations, concussion protocol. Authorization to return student medicines. And then it has food allergy management, emergency care plan, contagious or infectious diseases. I need to look at that one right there, contagious or infectious diseases. Just
Oh,
We
look-
haven't dealt with that at all.
I'm just curious on what are,
That's not important.
So immunization requirements, isn't that a state? Doesn't
Yeah.
the state require
Yeah.
that, right? So
Yeah,
why
any-
wouldn't that one be yellow then?
Probably because there are very specific things that we need to
regardless of the policy.
acknowledge
Yeah,
that it's policy. And maybe it's that leadership within the district needs to understand what those laws are.
the suicide is one that was newer in the last couple of years. Emergency treatment. Going on to the last page. Student interviews, interrogations, or arrests, arrest form, interview form. Removal of student during school hours, video surveillance, student tracking. Termination of driving privileges, student records. The only required one on this page would be the student data, privacy and security. Any of those others jump out as ones that we think that need to be district
So
policy?
where would permission to use likeness come in? Like an example,
Not even sure
where
what
would that come in?
Not even sure
Publish
what
in the
that is.
newspaper, a picture
A
of.
picture
Yeah.
of you in a newspaper, like if you're a sports athlete or something?
And we already have procedures in place, whether it's with that,
Some parents don't want,
Don't
They-
want the
they have to
kid's
fill
picture
out.
in the paper.
yeah.
don't want the spouse to see them, or
Oh.
maybe they're in the witness protection.
Can't tell you.
Or even a picture of a student participating in something at school posted online, on the school website.
They wanna keep that picture off the
You can, yeah,
off the
you can say,
internet.
And we do
Yeah,
have lists of those. So the parents said. So 3265, let me just pull up 3265 since you don't have that in there. That was student-owned electric devices. Andrea, you had a
I'm just curious what policies. are
question on that one. Okay, so. I need to go smaller. We don't need to see my face. There we go.
So it says that they shall not have in possession on school grounds any electronic communication device not provided by the district. So how does that pertain to their cell
Yeah,
phones?
they all have
So
cell
this,
phones.
so this would be, this, if this would be something that, that's what the board wanted to do, this policy basically says, put all of your communication devices that are student-owned away. Now, if you think that,
Well, that's
some of our
gonna,
last discussions had a.
That's gonna
a
create-
lot of people.
that's gonna create a lot of conflict
So if
there.
it's not policy, then we don't have to do that.
Correct.
Right.
But we could open up a really meaningful conversation, especially at the different levels.
I think this needs to be reviewed. It needs to have a conversation, because everything I'm hearing on the junior high level is that cell phones are being brought into the classroom. It's a huge distraction, and it's a headache to a parent who doesn't have a child with a cell phone and gets the guilt trip every single morning of my life is over because I don't have a cell phone like everybody else. There's nothing to do at recess because everybody's doing TikTok videos, even down in the 5th grade. There's nothing to do at recess because everybody's on their phones doing TikTok videos or whatever. It needs to be a discussion. There's a place for it, obviously, and there's parents who have children who take a phone for a reason. But does that phone need to be physically with them at all times in the classroom? There's just been instances where a kid was asked where their cell phone was. It's in my bag. It was clearly in their back pocket. The whole class saw it, and then it became a funny thing because they were lying to the teacher in front of everybody. It's taking it to another level where I think it's a problematic situation for teachers. I don't know how it is in the high school level, but
I'm curious, this would be something that I would like to hear from parents. I know there's one junior high in Idaho Falls that has a no cell phone policy.
What, on the school grounds or in the classroom?
Like they say, you put it away. And the purpose was, it's backed by research, but it's also to pull that off, you have to be 100% committed to like fight that fight. And right now, a lot of times, if it's not out during instruction, like then our teachers are probably pretty much ignoring it.
yeah.
That it, like they're addressing it when teachers give instruction when they can. But obviously, we were kids once, and we tried to get away with anything that we could in school. I can't say that's happening 100%. But I don't disagree with you. I have kids that age, and I don't want to get them a cell phone with access to everything on the internet in the palm of their hand.
And I can understand the purpose of having a kid take a phone with them,
Mhm.
but there are phones available for those that don't. But it's when it becomes a distraction in the classroom, and it's when it becomes an issue for the teacher to constantly have to address, that I think it becomes a problem that needs to be discussed further. Obviously, it's important for parents to have communication with their child, but
Correct.
parents should also understand that the child should be in the classroom during the day, and they shouldn't have to text back and forth or whatever during times that they're in class.
Because I know that there, and I experienced this as a administrator, and I was a K-4 principal, and there were times that the parents were like, but what if I need to get a hold of my kid? I want my kid to be able to contact me at any time. And a lot of times it gives them the parents a sense of security, I guess, if there was an emergency in the classroom.
Mhm.
That is so rare. Like when you look at yes, could anything bad? Yes, the worst thing could happen if we're looking at hypothetical situations, but 99.9% of the time, it's not going to be needed.
Yeah.
And is it worse off? I don't know.
What's the procedure right now for, say, in the junior high? The student has their phone out and it's a distraction,
Teacher,
and the teacher says, I've asked you to put it away and you won't, so go see Mr. H. Does the parent then have to come get the phone?
and
Are we
so,
following through with that?
so my
Because-
understanding, I don't know how much that's happening. Because it's going to be, it's one of those things that the parents don't want to be the bad guys. And the parents that do want to be are okay with being the bad guys are not, when I say the bad guys, that to say this is what it is. Most parents don't want to have that conflict with their kids. And we're seeing that teachers are kind of the same way. As long as it's not during instruction, teachers are allowing that. But I think,
Could it be possible that that telephone or the cell phone is becoming a disciplinary help to the teachers for some students that are usually a discipline problem? If you let them on their cell phone, they'll
They're quiet.
be quiet.
it could be, because I think there's one thing that would motivate kids more than anything is I need to have that.
Can I give a devil's advocate viewpoint here?
But it's work meeting.
I think we also want to consider though, before we try and totally eliminate devices, is what can we do to help teach and train? Because kids are going to take when we go to work, we take our cell phones. Are we utilizing, maybe we utilize those to help increase educational opportunities? You know, I don't know what the right answer is, but I do know that this is a flip side, that we want to be able to help teach and guide our students. And cell phones are a reality for them. And so,
For some, not all, because on the other side, you have those students who will not have a cell phone up to a certain age.
right, up to a certain age,
So if you're utilizing those phones in the classroom as a educational device,
right,
then you have those who do not have those.
right.
And so they then give their parents grief every
I
single
would
day.
I would like to be proved wrong on this one. This is just
So-
a hunch. I think the times that they're used for education are way less than they are for distraction,
Oh, yes.
entertainment, potential cyberbullying and harassment
Right,
through the videos, which you know, I'm wondering if at the very least on this one, administrative procedures need to be more clear. Like to come in and say, even if there's something on here that says the board wants administration to set up procedures with these guiding principles, basically, that there's not distractions in the classroom, that there's a clear steps in line with that. And that would be something that, you know, as a board, you'd be able to follow through more strongly with that. And instead of going to the specifics on it, but just say, we want you guys to look into this more.
Mhm.
Do you think there's a significant amount of bullying videos, things like that going on?
I don't know about significant, but it makes it easier. It makes it a lot easier when you're using technology.
Mhm.
And I've seen it a couple different times in the year and a half that I've been here, where social media accounts, it's like, it's one hand to tease somebody and bully somebody in person. You'll find that it's the students that are involved with sending hateful text messages to different groups. You know, it increases because of the ease of the different apps that are available.
And the fact that it's not in person makes it so, because anybody's willing to say anything if they could just put it out there.
And we
without-
see that on social
there's a
media too,
time,
towards the board,
so-
you know?
Obviously,
It's
this-
easier for people to disagree online with
Yeah, then in
what-
person.
than in person with what
Yeah.
we're trying to do.
Obviously, this policy is outdated in that it's,
The ham radios.
yeah, I mean, it doesn't pertain to the use of cell phones on campus right now.
Yeah, it looks like
So
this,
that needs
this
to be
has to be all rewritten, doesn't
Well,
it?
it just was.
Well,
I mean, it's saying that you can't have any cell phones on campus
Yeah.
whatsoever,
and how would
That's
you,
not
how
the
would you
case.
ever enforce that, you know?
and you couldn't.
You
People are
couldn't,
going to have their cell phones,
that's right.
and there's.
Well, the
there's a
parents
reason
would
for
probably
it.
demand it on their kids.
I'm not saying that they shouldn't have them at school. I'm just saying phones shouldn't be in the classroom during actual instruction.
Mhm.
They shouldn't be out during actual
Well,
instruction.
here's the
without-
thing.
So can we
Purpose.
require that the phones be turned off during the class time?
Oh, yeah.
Like you said, then it becomes a teacher responsibility to
It's-
watch that
it's
and
put
it
one more
becomes
thing.
one more thing.
But sometimes it might be if we had some school procedures or even a district policy that allows the teachers to give the students an out, not an out, but it allows the teacher an out. They have somebody to say, this is not my decision.
Mhm.
But a teacher should follow procedures or policy one way or another. Like if the district has a procedure in place and administration sets it up and says, this is what we're doing, the teacher should still follow that. It's
I
just,
think that's what we're lacking, is just a clear cut,
we are.
first offense, boom, this is what happens, and you all know it. Every kid in this classroom knows what happens if you can't keep that thing in your pocket.
And this could be something where, from a board perspective, if you come to me and say, Mr. Williams, can you get your administration to have a more clear-cut procedures in place? Then I go to them, I put the procedures together, and then any parent could come and give us feedback, and it doesn't have to go through this other spot. But I agree with you, we don't have the clear-cut procedures right now.
I think let's work on that, and then it does come down to classroom management, but then the teachers have
Guidelines.
an excuse, something else to say, this is the way it is, guys.
Because if you want to look at the two different extremes between just all out freedom and not, the middle school in Idaho Falls that did this, middle school, they don't even allow it at lunch.
Mm. Wow.
They just, and the purpose is that kids during lunch would just go right to their device and they're not even, it would be a group of kids right here, like we're still kids, right, guys? But if we were hanging out, all five of us would be on our phone. I'd sometimes be texting Tanis and,
Yeah.
you know, and it's just not,
And that probably was a pain in the butt at first, but I bet now it's not. I bet those kids know it's just not allowed.
yeah.
So you just don't do it. I don't know how long it took for them to get to that
I
level.
would
but
be, you know, it might be interesting to like survey those parents in the, especially junior high or high school, and just say, what are your thoughts, parents? Because I think we would be surprised. We would see a big difference. We would see some that would say they have to have it,
Right.
that you're taking away the right of my student to not have it. But I just, each family has, I don't even know if it's values or just expectations on their own kids, or they don't see how,
I have a different
So,
point of view
point of
on the
view.
use of devices.
and it's not so much values, but on like moral issues, it's more of values on, is it okay for my kid to be distracted during school? And that's the difference. And I think the distraction part is one that we as a school really should look at a lot more directly. What type of distraction is this causing? But then I would even take it to another level. If you're out making TikTok videos, which I've heard of TikTok. I'm getting too old. I don't even know what those things are.
Yeah.
But if you're making those videos up and then you come back into the classroom and they're still talking about that if there was any type of harassment or hazing or anything going on, that just disrupted the next class period. And so the fact that we had that device there just
Mm.
disrupts it all
I
day
think
long.
that hazing and bullying should be a no tolerance.
Yeah. You know, the word no tolerance, I think we need to be strict with it, but no tolerance, I think handcuffs us more,
Well,
but I think we should be seriously strict about it.
yeah, I mean, it can cause so many things for a student that is on the other end of it.
Because,
even as far as suicide.
right, and there's going to be, anytime we bring up the word bullying, harassment, there has to be a pattern behind it and it has to be consistent. Because almost every single situation that I've ever looked into, very few of them meet the definition of true bullying because it's two-sided. Kids are, they're each time they're up in the ante. And then after like 5 or 6 times, this person finally goes above and beyond. It's really both parties' fault, but there should be protection that we make sure that that's not happening on them.
I think so too.
So student devices.
Well, I would like nothing better than to see cell phones taken out of the school situation, but it's always been too big of a fight.
Yeah, we're gonna have too big of a fight from the parents.
I just don't.
But
know
is it the
how-
right thing to do?
Well, there you go.
You know,
Well,
that's the part is, the thing that we always have to look at is just because it's not a fight. Like I'm looking at dress code for one example. Is a hole in somebody's jeans worth a fight? Probably
Not
not.
to me.
Probably not. Is distraction to the education?
Yeah,
Yeah. If it's distracting the education, we probably should be a lot more serious about that.
There are a lot of other things though that can distract kids as far as dress code goes.
What's that?
I'm not saying. 2-week break.
Yeah, those are things that you look at that with, there will be some things that impact it and some things that don't. It's just, where do we draw the balance? Because nothing is black and white, it makes it very difficult to make rules and that follow every single situation. So, let's see, I'm gonna go look at district provided mobile computing. That's 3275. 3275 A1. This is just one of the alternatives. There's
Now,
2 of
these
them.
Chromebooks all have there are a lot of, they've blocked a lot of,
you have a
Okay.
firewall
Okay.
protection in them.
they've blocked a lot of,
I think we stressed to Jody to put up a strong firewall. You know,
It's there, but it's just like our,
can students kind of work around the firewall?
If they want to badly enough, they'll figure out how to get around it.
Is
That's-
that right?
Absolutely.
it's
Can
just,
Jody counter that or not?
no,
No, because the ability to work around those firewalls continues to evolve. And so to be able to block those, you have to update the firewall, but you have to find the problem before you update the firewall.
So it's kind of a cat and mouse deal, isn't
It
it?
is.
that's a perfect way of explaining it. It's one of those things where the basic things are in place, but it still requires parents to check in. And here's the thing, if parents aren't afraid to put an iPhone in their kid's hand with access to unlimited data, like they're gonna get around it anyway, because they're gonna go through they're gonna if students have their own phone with their own data, they can go out without us tracking it.
Mhm.
So if it's a student-owned phone, they can do that.
Has there been any instances of that happening in our schools? Where they brought in some crazy stuff off
Oh, yeah.
there?
Oh, I'm sure.
Has there?
Yes.
Has there been some examples?
Yeah, there are times where students will get inappropriate sites. pornography.
That's what I'm asking.
Yeah.
They've kind of worked their way where they
Yeah,
figured it
but-
out.
But again, those are personal devices on their own personal
Yeah, but
networks.
they can't bring it into school.
And
though.
when it's found, it is addressed.
Mhm.
Parents are contacted. Those are things that happen. So this one here looks like it just. It's a record. This looks like it could be a procedure. Because basically that's all it's saying is the superintendent shall establish procedures.
Mhm.
Just for devices that are going home. Probably don't need to have that.
Overall, Carrie, has the students been pretty gentle with Chromebooks? Do you know?
To the best of my
Have
knowledge, we don't have a whole
have they
lot of
respected them?
damage. I don't think we have a whole lot of damage issues with it. I think overall, our student body is grateful to be able to
Do they
have
reuse
access to them, absolutely. But there's always gonna be exceptions to every rule, but in general, I think our students aren't trying to get around firewalls. I think in general, they are treating our stuff with respect.
Well, that's good to hear.
Yeah, it's
That's
overall,
good to hear.
And driving,
there's always 5% that
Yeah.
doesn't.
and the phone that we have does not have internet. You don't have either, and it won't. So, it's strictly for phone calling and
Right.
limited texting. So,
So the restraint, seclusion, adversive techniques. This is just indicating that if restraints are used, that the employee must be trained in it, trained in the procedures for it.
Say every superintendent, or not superintendent, but principal trained in
I'm not sure.
restraint. Are you?
I'm not sure. I wasn't trained officially at Madison, but I was part of some of the secondary trainings where you'd have to train the trainer type thing.
So who does the training, or where do you go
So,
to get the training?
There are several different places that have the training, but it's for the most part, as long as teachers aren't manhandling kids, unless it's one of those things where it's going to be impacting, harming themselves or harming others. That's usually what it comes down to, should be the time where restraints should be used. But this again would be, there it is, training of the personnel. Positive behavior intervention techniques and supports. So those are things that this is so, so expansive to be able to do this. And a lot of times, how do you train everybody for something that you may never use? That's the other tricky part.
Yeah, like you said in another meeting, you can't train people on everything.
Yeah.
our teachers and everyone else at the school, do they ever go through any type of first aid CPR type of training?
They have before in the past.
We've had a class on it. Yeah.
We have an online training as well that has different types of safety trainings, like the artificial defibrillators. There's different training that you go through. They're not as good as having the actual real one, the hands-on one, but they are things that are taking place. I know the coaches, they have to go in and take certain online classes as well for that. But again, this is going back to all the different things that we can and should be providing for teachers. That's
Just curious,
we
you have
should.
aides who are assigned to students who have certain health
yeah.
issues, are they trained specifically for that student's needs?
For the most part, yes, but then when you have, we have turnover
Right.
with our aides and just getting them back in. So there are those discussions that are taking place with them, but I don't know if we always have
Or even,
the training.
you know,
in this.
interaction with different teachers during the day. They're not always with the same teacher.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious how teachers could be trained for those types of emergencies.
For sure.
What does that say right above? Can you go back?
Right there?
Yeah.
Training in CPR and basic first aid.
Yeah. And who are they saying that applies to?
So that would be
School personnel.
certified administrator, certificated teacher.
Okay,
So it's pretty much everybody.
yeah.
Could you use your, your Fridays that you do
Oh,
your
we-
teacher training
We could.
and say, okay, once a year, we're just, this
Mhm.
is when we do our annual CPR first aid training.
Yeah.
Because even minor, I mean, it sounds minor, but instances where you have a child that might choke on something, do you have people who could
We do
respond
the Heimlich.
to that instance?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I think, I think we ought to have a CPR once a year. Still in the basement.
because anything can happen to kids.
Yes.
Even as parents, I've had two that had the serious instances of choking.
Really?
And so it's beneficial to know those things.
Maybe especially with your lunch ladies.
Yeah, I wonder if lunchroom
I'll have to
personnel
I'll
would,
have to check with Lisa because she does have
wonder if
like a
she's,
training log for her staff.
Mhm.
Fundraising activities. Let's see what this, this one here is, let's see, the board acknowledges that solicitations of funds from students, staff, and citizens must be limited, since students are a captive audience. Program in schools. So this one here basically is a policy that says there's a procedure in place.
Mhm.
It says may be permitted by a superintendent provided that instructional program is not adversely affected. And right now, our current, it's a policy or even a procedure. I just know that when I was hired, it was my understanding that each club could do one fundraiser. That's what, so so you look at that and say, okay, if you look at PTO, they're not a school, even though everybody thinks they're a school, they're their own club. They're like the Lions Club.
Mhm.
And our booster club is the same way.
well, and then the Ed Foundation too.
And the Ed Foundation is outside, even though each of those groups could utilize kids.
And we have,
And
We
we have
have.
with the Ed Foundation as
yeah,
well.
we had a really successful drive here a couple years ago.
What are you guys'
It's been that long.
What are your feelings on this? I've had phone calls from people saying, why are you guys doing fundraising? And then I ask them, do you have any other way we can make money? And then the conversation stops. I know it's annoying. I know it's
I
not
don't
fun.
mind fundraising at all.
The thing with fundraising is it's a necessary evil.
So you
It
say you
is.
don't mind
I
it?
don't mind it at all. I've had one fundraiser since I moved here 6 years ago. Come to my house, my own granddaughter.
Oh, people are gonna start coming right now. They're gonna, a new person to hit up for,
Well, I don't know of any that are even going on.
not right,
So
right
the
right
wrestling
now.
one,
The wrestling one.
Yeah.
my husband benefited greatly from the jerky.
I'm chairman of the Ed Foundation. We had a big fundraiser here a couple
Oh,
years
we
ago.
did participate in that one,
But-
but. that
But
wasn't
it might have been annoying for some people, but the benefits to the students is just overwhelming. And the teachers.
Yeah.
in classrooms.
So if one club gets one fundraiser per year, whose is the hay fund drive then? That one seems to
Would that
benefit
be like
a
the
lot.
sports,
Yeah,
the athletics?
I've been talking about this for a while. I'm working with Patty to see if there's some other place where the district can relieve some of the burden from athletics. Maybe as we look at travel, maybe the district just covers all travel and just make it cut and dry. If kids are on a bus, we're covering them. And if that takes place, that would probably relieve a lot of the cost on the others. I would love to push the hay fundraiser back to the PTO 100%, not PTO, Booster Club.
Booster Club.
My wife probably just heard that and freaked out at home.
Is there a pretty active booster club or is this?
This would allow the Booster Club to maybe generate some energy and look at that as a way. I don't know, I just, from the way it looks to me, and I've shared this before with you guys in other meetings, that the hay fundraiser has turned into a way for us to supplement something that I think we should have been taking care of in the first place, whether it's through GATE or whether it's through club fundraisers. And yes, it's helped, and it's helped with, because really what the two things that I've seen the hay fundraiser help with, it covers costs to state tournaments. That money has to come from somewhere. And it covers costs for uniforms. We're going to need to revisit in the next 2 or 3 months our pay-to-play prices when we get to the end of the sports season and figure out how much money we've lost because of lack of revenue from GATE. There's a lot, and I think this would be just a really good time to just restructure. This is how we do things. This is how we have things available. Let's see. The other one I wanted to look at was school-related foreign travel by students, 3460. These are ones that weren't the highlighted ones. School-related foreign trips are allowed by the Westchester District when experiences are required field trips. We don't have this right now, do we? As I should know that.
The only thing is the trip abroad they take, but that's not associated with the school, right?
Yeah, it's an independent group.
Yeah, our current policy, as I'm looking just in the manual, we don't have anything on that. But this, as I'm reading this is like, it's a school approved.
Yeah, because it has to have superintendent's approval.
And ours is not,
No,
our trip is not, doesn't have
Anything
anything to do with
sponsored.
anything. Okay.
yeah, I think we keep this one off. And keep it the same way we've been doing
Yeah.
it.
Why get involved?
And
Is there a non-school sponsored trip this spring?
it was canceled
Oh,
due to COVID. Okay, that answers that one.
Does that include American Heritage?
American Heritage.
That was canceled.
At that time, there was not even a plane that could go over.
Yeah.
Last year they had the group that was doing it was going to Europe.
Mhm.
Italy.
And contagious or infectious disease, 3520. contagious or infectious diseases. District is required to provide educational services to all students residing in boundaries. May be denied to any child diagnosed as having a contagious or infectious disease. I'm wondering where COVID would come in under this.
A serious communicable disease.
So I know that Idaho code already allows you to do that with or without a policy. The policy, I think just, because we see it with the Idaho code, 2 out of 3, yeah, there it is, 33512, which is governance of schools.
Oh, it even covers life.
Lice. When you talk, that's the interesting thing is when you talk, I don't know if we need to have anything this specific if it's already in Idaho code.
I'm surprised it specifically lists lice.
Because you talk to health departments about lice, they don't say if a school has lice, it's how much lice does a school have. That's what they say.
Is it contained in the classroom?
But it's just a normal thing that happens in schools. But yeah, I don't know if we need to have. Yeah, they have a whole page on headlights there. I think this can be procedure.
Yeah,
This can
Yeah.
be procedure under the state law.
Yeah.
Because on one hand, if looking at this, and we can, now that we're almost a year into the COVID situation, and really, I should say an experiment. This is really kind of a social experiment with something that we're still just learning about when it comes to the effects of COVID. And I was reading this morning about the different strains now that are
mhm.
coming off of COVID. Like, it's not going to end like
You know,
quickly.
they say it could go on for 3 more years,
If you're looking at the different
all the different strains.
strains, and
Yeah.
but initially what they say is this one spreads a lot quicker, but they have no proof that it's actually worse or makes people more sick.
Mhm.
And so a policy like this could look at it where, you know, I guess you, on one hand, you could say it gives you a document to say, hey, we can back this, but we can already do that under Idaho Code 33, make sure I don't, 33.512. So I don't think we need that. That's just my opinion. So I don't know. Looking back at that one, I think we need to make sure that student-owned electronic communication devices is something we really, really specifically hit. I agree with Andrea on that,
I'd like to know the opinion of the teachers,
on that one.
what they've seen, what problems they've had. Obviously, I'm just hearing it from a student's perspective,
Mhm.
and it could be totally different from a teacher's perspective. So I would be curious to see how they've handled it, what they've been faced with it.
I've written it down for us to discuss with the administrators in our meeting this afternoon.
Okay, thank you. I think moving here forward on this, now that we have our packets of the ones we're gonna look at, we'll just read through them, you know, between now and next meeting. We'll have this under discussion item. If you have suggestions or ideas between now and then, you can contact me individually and I can make the changes to get ready for the packet before the board meeting. Unless you have some right now.
I just have one right now on the out-of-district enrollment application.
Yes.
The question says, has a student ever been suspended or expelled from school? And then if yes, it wants to know.
I know you're looking at
I
our,
gave them our
our
current,
current one.
yes.
Let me pull up, because they do have an example, 3010F. So this is the example. It may or may not be similar to ours, but I'll just. Okay, this application form. Has a student ever been suspended or expelled from school, or has a student committed a disciplinary offense for which he should be suspended or expelled? Okay, so what's your question?
When that gets marked yes, I guess I want to know what the procedure is.
Find out why.
And are we just automatically letting them in, giving them another chance because we benefit financially from it?
I know what happens right now is phone calls are made to the other administrators of the previous school.
Mhm.
I do think it's a case by case basis. There are times I know in the history of this board that there have been students whose names have been brought back up for disciplinary actions who are out of district. And I also know of ones that there was a concern on why students were being brought in, and that student has benefited and thrived having that, I don't want to say second chance. I think it's just a case by case basis on it that, we really should look at that. I think if they've been expelled, because suspended is different, expelled, we don't have to accept expelled students.
Well, we don't have to,
And we really don't have to accept
anyone.
suspended students either.
we're out of district.
Correct.
So what I'm wondering is, if that gets marked yes, then I feel like we need to have a stronger
Secondary step to that.
come before the board and make your case. You have been a problem in the past. Why should we let you in here?
Mhm.
Because my two biggest pet peeves are when you are disruptive in the class so much that you are affecting another child's learning, whether that be because you can't follow the rules or phone or, whatever.
Mhm.
But I don't want it to just be an automatic stamp of approval. Yep, you're in.
Do we have anything on here, whereas if a parent doesn't fill it out honestly? Oh, there it is. Does our current one have something like that on it?
As representation.
Mm-mm.
This document here is more in depth than the one that we currently have.
Mhm.
So I think I'm gonna highlight that one there.
You can look at that one and see if it's a better one than what we have.
Yeah,
Yeah, there's nothing holding them accountable of any information.
On that one.
Well,
Misrepresented.
don't you call them?
Yeah,
The school
we do call them,
office.
but I like,
But this is holding the parent responsible too,
yes,
not just going, to the administrators to find out information, but it's also putting it on the parent that everything you're saying is honest and upfront.
so this part right here is one that I was talking about earlier, which is not in our current one, which I think we should add. Some specialized programs are only offered in a limited number of schools. Well, it doesn't say schools.
Yeah.
For further information. School district. Okay, I'll put that on there, that we look at the form and have that form on there, because this form here will give us a little bit, it's more than just the one question on our current one. That you're looking at disciplinary actions.
I like that.
We could look at the procedures if you're looking at entrance placement and transfer. We look at this, the statement of guiding principles. Productive citizens, that's not really what I was looking for. Thirty 10. P. Let's look at this here and see, because there's some procedures that you were looking for.
And I like
On
that
that
this
one.
has to be done on an annual basis.
And
If you have
the-
been a pain in the butt all year, then the next year rolls around and you just don't get approved.
And they are, we still receive those every single year from everybody out of district.
I think that avoids a lot of time-consuming hearings and trying to make your case and excuses and.
So here's the procedures, basically, that the board will not admit any student prior to viewing that student's records. When it says the board, that would just mean superintendent. But this one here says the board.
So does that have to be changed then, the wording?
So
No, we just need to start doing that.
Just do it.
I think that's our job.
So the state law says February 1st, which traditionally that doesn't usually happen. So in theory, or I don't know why they put a February 1st date there. So if we were following this to a letter, and this didn't happen in my last district either, we should have every out of district student
They should be doing them right now.
do them right now, saying that they're coming back. But then, if that's the case, and we say February 1st, anybody after February 1st, we would have to say, sorry, you didn't meet the deadline,
Right.
which, as we're trying to be, when I say accommodating, to keep our numbers up.
It's
But if we let people in
it's just
after
trying
February
to have,
1st,
it's just trying to help you plan your
Plan.
year, so you have enough teachers, but
And then what if you have those that have just moved into the area?
right, I think you should say hopefully, or
I don't know that I
hopefully,
would put a specific date in there to hold yourself to that and then say you're not.
but if it's state law, we don't have a choice.
Is that what state law? That date?
so I guess here's the thing, Candace, that this one would give us that option. The district has the option of accepting a student who does not meet the criteria set herein if the student agrees to special conditions of admission as set forth by the district. So if we did have a situation where a student was suspended or expelled, they could come here, and whether that has to be by the board or whether that's just administration, and say, we're letting you come in, but these are the things we're expecting to see. And if not, we're going to revoke the admission into the district.
And I think that's something the board should be involved in, because we haven't been in the past, and I feel like it's been way too lax. It's just been a financial approval or financial reason.
So are you saying that you want to keep this in policy versus a procedural?
We don't want to change it.
Do you want to review every out of district application?
No, just those that have disciplinary.
The ones,
Check that box. You've been suspended or expelled. I want you to come in here and I want to know why. Why should I let you into my school then? If you're gonna be a problem, you tell me what you have changed in your behavior and what you promised to do, and we'll make an agreement and move forward. But
It'd be good to know the route that they've taken. Have they just gone from the school where they were having problems over to this school, or were there other things that were recommended prior to applying to a completely different district? Because a lot of other schools have alternative routes that can be
Yeah.
met. So that would be a good thing to know as well.
And I just think it might be taken a little more serious by the student and the parents and say,
We have to go before a board.
they're gonna make us plead our case
Mhm.
and we better toe the line.
Yeah.
Instead of just, well, we filled this out and you said we can come.
You don't want it to be where one problem is just transferring itself to another area. Not to pinpoint a person as being a problem, but
And I don't
you
think it
want to give them
happens
the
a lot.
best, think the best of people, but you don't want to be taken advantage of at the same time.
So let's look at, so this would be the application. Once the receiving school principal receives the application from an out of district, the principal makes recommendation to approve or not approve the transfer by completing the form. Principal sends the form to the superintendent, who shall. See, I don't think we need to do that for every student. Form a team to be able to consider. But I think we could put in here on the options that in the case of a student, out of district student who's had a history
Of being expelled
or
or
suspended.
disciplinary problems.
Not just say disciplinary problems. Because if you had suspension, we might have a situation where a kid really didn't get suspended,
Right.
but upon whether if you wanted to have this structure in place, you could say whether the parent fills it out or whether through our conversation. So let's say a parent fills it out and says, no, no problem, no problem. We call the previous principal and they say, we've had some serious, maybe it's not even serious. Maybe it's just the student is disruptive in the class quite often. He hasn't been suspended before, but we've had issues with that. I still think that would send the right message to say, okay, before you can just jump ship and come into our school, we need to have that conversation. So I guess, does it need to be a board conversation or does it just need to be administration, superintendent, principal, superintendent, family? I guess that's the part, because if not, we would need to wait until or call a board meeting or have it during executive session. So just.
Personally, I think it needs to be in front of the board because I think that's scary for a kid.
How often?
Yeah,
Guess.
How often would this happen?
yeah.
3?
Because it's different. If a student moves if they live within our boundaries,
Yeah, we have to.
then that's different. This would just be somebody living outside of West Jefferson school boundaries.
So they would just have to wait till the next executive session, the board meeting to apply.
Or we put together a special,
Or we'd have to have a special meeting. But how many special meetings are we gonna have to have?
I don't see this happening very often.
I don't think so.
Probably not very
So it
often.
might be worth it.
I mean,
But that would strengthen what our current procedures are, policies are.
well, and to me, if you're willing to jump through those hoops, either A, you're out of options and you really need it in this school, or B, you want to come here and you're going to take it serious. So,
And that does send a message that this board values the education of the students that are here. It allows people to still have a chance to come, but we're also protecting the integrity of the
Yeah.
educational process and
Yeah,
opportunities for our
we
students.
value discipline in this district.
Or just protecting, we don't want somebody to come in and take away the opportunity for somebody else to learn.
Mhm. We don't want to bring in disruption.
And in a way, those kids that live here in the district, still, if they are constantly disrupting the educational environment, we still have, by law, the ability to address those situations.
As a board member, I wouldn't mind having that happen. I wouldn't mind coming in to.
And in a special case by
Yeah, in a
case.
special case by
Let me
case.
add that,
I think it's important enough.
we work through this enrollment form, which might have the procedures in it already. Yeah. Oops. I was just gonna back that up. I can't edit it on this one.
I think you can.
I'm not going to right now.
Okay.
I'll work on that. So Dennis, if you also want to work through that idea, just make sure that whatever we put in there has that.
Earlier, when you pulled up, I'm gonna change gears a little bit.
Yeah, that's fine.
When you pulled up, I think it was the use of restraint,
Yes.
and it mentioned in there the CPR first aid training. Does that coincide with where it says emergency care plan 3515F?
Let me pull that one up. Is it mine? Say that again, Andrea. 30,
Emergency care plan 3515F.
3515. Okay, so emergency care plan.
So that's the plan for the student.
For the student,
With the-
not for
okay.
not for the district. I think
The
that
district. Okay.
the training part could be under an emergency.
So it says emergency treatment. I'm just curious.
I think the other plan that you're looking for is how do we make sure that our training process includes things like CPR
First aid. Yeah.
and first aid. And that would be a professional development plan that's connected probably to this health and safety. So like our safety committee type.
Mhm.
That's another thing that definitely you get into these meetings and, you know, I hope I can finish all my stuff before I retire. Like, there's so much to do in these, you know, and you look at it, it's so expansive. But I don't disagree, like we need to have something in place where we're saying, okay, is everybody getting trained to this every single year? Okay, because we'll need that,
Mhm.
but I don't think it falls under
No, not that one.
under this area. Okay,
Do you have the number for that application, the other out-of-district application
okay,
we were looking at?
so, oops. There was this one, 3010F. Is the one I was looking at. I'm curious, as we're brainstorming with each other, what 3020 enrollment and attendance records. I think that's just a given. I don't know why you need to have that
Mhm.
part of the procedures. Okay, that answered it. Yeah. Don't even know. All right, any other thoughts with? We went through a lot. I don't know if we accomplished anything.
Plan.
So,
We gotta make,
We have a plan moving forward to
we
go
gotta make
go
a
through
few
these.
revisions is all.
I'll go through and start making like cross-outs and things, so if anybody finds any that they want to
Okay.
add,
This
let's
will
just
provide good reading.
provide good reading and
A lot of reading.
moving forward with that.
You need
But I
something
like
to
those
do, though.
suggestions of fine tuning the open enrollment application form, be more specific on the procedures of students that have had a history of discipline
Mhm.
disruptions in outside of the district. Start a conversation about student-owned electronic devices, specifically phones in schools.
Mhm.
And other than that, look back into these other ones.
So we talk about the fundraising to
The
make it
fundraising,
the
unless the board wants to come out and say, this is
booster club.
what it specifically, I think we stick with the procedure of one per. I don't think it needs to be a policy.
Which policy numbers have we highlighted to add to our requireds?
Just the one. Oh, no. maybe-
Just the open enrollment application form 3010F.
Okay.
And then the STARD procedure for electronic communication devices to really start that conversation.
Okay, do we want to print these off for them to have?
We can.
And then take out school-related foreign travel.
Yes, yeah, that was one. If I didn't highlight that, fundraising
It's not
activities.
part of the school.
And
Just gonna
Should
take
and as
that
I-
out, or do we want-
Should it be?
as we start to develop our procedural file, so you have your policy file and your procedural file on these. I see that we'll have a 3000 series policy and a 3000 series procedures
Uh-huh.
on that. At any time, the board can come to the superintendent and say, we need to look more in depth into these procedures, just like with Andrea, because my oldest is gonna be on the phone pretty soon.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
It's gonna be interesting to talk to the teachers and have them say, we want the Idaho Falls policy. We don't want any phones in the school at all.
Or when we went into this before, remember, a couple of years ago, a lot of teachers didn't care.
Good
Didn't
catch.
care at all, especially in the high school. They just said, I just ignore it.
See, I'm not against phones, I'm just against the distraction that they present in the classroom.
I
think
share
the
that, I share
younger-
that
I
same
think it's the
sentiment.
younger they are. Well,
So-
maybe I'm wrong, but I think it's at 7th and 8th grade.
Well,
I-
it's even hard in the fifth grade.
It's fifth through
It's
Oh,
eighth.
they
like,
have them too?
I'm going
Oh.
out to
I've seen
recess,
the first
I have
graders.
nothing to do because all my friends are doing TikTok videos. So
Fifth
it's
through
like,
eighth.
that's
Wow.
hard because there was a time before cell phones. I do remember that.
Well, we could,
I should
Life
too.
did
here's
exist.
the other thing is our procedures could anybody not in high school, you know what, during lunch, put your phones away. You don't need to
Yeah.
be,
There's so many
Well,
other
they'll be
things.
sneaking the use of them.
well,
though.
oh, they will be. But even sixth grade, you don't need your phone out at recess. You don't.
It's that same mentality as what do you do with your spare time?
Mhm.
You're on video games or phones. And sometimes you just have to protect kids.
Because I'm
From
not gonna
themselves.
lie, I could have,
But they
I would've
don't want
loved
to be
it.
protected from
Right?
as
themselves.
a kid, I would have loved to have made little videos and this and that, but you have lots of time at home to do that.
Not when somebody else that's sitting there next to you becomes the object of
The
your
joke.
Right.
Yep. Absolutely. Okay, do
They
we-
have their rights too.
do we need to take a break
5 minutes?
before we can go to the next one? Let's do that. So, good discussion. We'll be back.
Why don't you just
sharing the screen again. Going back to that. Were you supposed to start the video and I started off, or what?
You said, it says Mr. Williams will start his video later.
I'm not on a video though, am I?
No, I asked you to restart your video. That's what it said.
So start my video.
Yes.
All right. Okay. So Madam Chair, we're on 2.2.
We're back. Okay. Moving right along then. Calendar 2021, 2022.
So I do have the packet out that just gives more information as I've looked at just the differences between calendars. I've been here for a year and a half and we're projecting a calendar into the future. So you can see on the handout the calendar comparison. So I have on the different ones the 4-day proposed or the 5-day hybrid proposed. So the ones on the left are the two that we would be going towards. The third column over is the current 5-day hybrid that we're on. And then the last one is the 5-day early out that we had in 2019 and 2020. As I was putting this together, it reminded me a little bit about the progression from the 1920 to the 2021 and just different conversations on during PAW meetings, conversations, you know, that Nedra and I've had at the PLC conference in Utah. And I guess it helped me go back and see the progression of thought along these lines. And it wasn't, you know, it really wasn't trying to get to where we're at right now with a 4-day proposal initially. It just kind of evolved into that. The whole purpose initially was for professional development. And from the PAW meetings also, when I started talking about calendars, this was back in the first couple of months that I was superintendent, some of the things with the calendar from 2 years ago, if you remember, is we had a lot of days where elementary was not in and high school was and junior high was and it wasn't. And you looked at the calendar and there had the legend down underneath it showed all the different days where kids were in and out. And then we also recognized that the early out Friday was not the best professional development use of time for our teachers. And so as we look at the 5-day early out, we had 170 days for the secondary and 162 days. Now those days weren't all full days. There were 132 full days. That would be your typical Monday through Thursday. And then you'd have your early out. And I probably should, instead of saying half, I should have said early out day on those 38 and 30. The reasons why the elementary didn't have to have as many days is because state requirements, and you can see that midway through the State Department of Education requirements. Secondary has the 990 minutes that are required 4 through 8, 900 and so forth. You also have the start times that were there from 2 years ago. Hamer Elementary started at 8 o'clock to 2:50. I actually made a change around harvest time to put Hamer at 7:45, just because when I went to Hamer Elementary and observed what was happening at that time, kids were getting dropped off at 7:30 anyway at Hamer because the buses were dropping them off to try to get down here. And I thought we might as well have kids in school instead of having either free time. The teachers were good about watching the kids, but it was also a half hour of unstructured time. Tarleton Elementary started at 8:20. I believe their first bell rang at 8:15. This was where they had breakfast being served before, but again, we had about a half an hour of time where students were supervised, but it was unstructured time, where we still have to pay for people to be here, but we just weren't, with kids were here by 8 o'clock for the most part, between 8:05. And so as I sat down with those parents at the PAW meeting, they said, why do we have to have a calendar where they're in here, they're not here? Can we do something where more than not, it's the same all the way across? And if buses are dropping kids off by between 8 and 8:05, why can't school start at 8:10? And so the other thing I looked at with the 5-day hybrid schedule for 2021 is our junior high and high school were not on the same schedule, bell schedule. And so because of that, they were sharing teachers. So we looked into the 6-period trimester, because that's what the junior high was already doing. That's what Idaho Falls does. That's what Blackfoot does as well. And that's what extended the time on the day. So that's why some people are saying, well, why did you extend the time on the day to fit that all in? So as you look at the progression to the here, from 2 years ago, this year's schedule, we are 10 minutes more for Hamer, 20 minutes more for Tarleton Elementary because they started at 8:20 and ended earlier, and 15 minutes more for the high school, where last year was 8:15. This year it's 8:10 to 25 to 35. Now that might be like 1 minute off here or there. I think the high school might have been 26 or 27. I just wanted to put the approximate number in there. So as we're looking at how would a proposed 4-day, because the whole purpose of this is just to give the board enough information to say, okay, this is what we wanted to do. Now, going back to saying, why are we even proposing the 4-day? When I opened up the survey, followed the amount of people that said they were interested in it. The people that aren't interested in it are included in the 35% from the survey, and maybe it's 40%, but right now, throughout the process, the ones that have said that they're against it are typically the same ones that were last time, but I've had a lot more people now say that once we've seen the process, heard the differences, they're open to either way. That's kind of where I'm at. So it's not like every single person that was on that 65% in favor wasn't like, yes, let's go to it. It was, I'm open to it if that's what the board feels like it is. I know that doesn't make it any easier for you guys, because it's not, it'd be really nice to like see exactly what everybody is thinking. But I've seen a lot of people say whatever works, because both of these schedules I think are great schedules. I really do. If you were to ask me, which I will put in the recommendations, the 4-day, if I had to look for a pro over that, would be a teacher recruitment tool. It would be streamlining our transportation assignments and working with the transportation with that. And then the last one would be that it still has its professional development, so it's kind of a wash. And so really it's more of a teacher. The biggest pro that I can see would be a teacher recruitment tool. And so that's what I'm seeing right now.
Now what's the cons?
The cons of it would be all under a preference. And so
That we go later.
that we go later. Now that's a con to some people, but it falls under the preference part. The cons really for both of them are it's just
And then
it's just a different way of doing it.
Right.
And that's where I'm looking at. It's not I was just visiting with Mr. McDonald during that break, and there are some changes from this calendar all the way over on our schedule, where and I'd have to actually go back before we put in the mentoring period to see, because during this time our class periods I think were 72 minutes long, or or 68, excuse me, these were 68. I think the year before they were 72, and then they took certain off to create the mentoring period on that. With the mentoring period in, some of the teachers may look at this and say, well, I don't have as much time to teach my content as I used to. But when I'm adding these numbers together, I'm including the mentoring intervention time in with the overall, because that counts as instructional time. And so the teachers will just see that differently. They may see that, well, now I have less time to teach my content, but it's not just about your content. It's also about, do we have the process of RTI? Because if we wanted to, we could just go right back to the traditional model. You're the subject's teacher. You just take your kid and don't worry about anybody else. Because when the kids are in your classroom, this is when you're teaching. But that's not what we're trying to accomplish. We're trying to accomplish the teacher efficiency by being able to share in the common standards. And so really the con is it's 30 minutes longer.
Okay, you got that. And then
It's a later day, but somebody might see that as a pro.
they might.
But
Then
that's-
you've got Fridays
Mhm.
with some unsupervision. And
Which,
some
which could be a
with
con for some families.
Some families.
Yeah.
But for some families, that's a big con.
Yeah.
And,
And because you got both parents working.
right. But in this community, you don't have that situation as much.
You have it in a lot of different ones. It's some of the things I want to address with that. With this, you can see that with this 4-day, 149 proposed. With the calendar that we have here, there's 100 and, I hope I did that right. Nope, it should be 143. I knew I was gonna make a mistake on that one.
43.
I knew I was gonna make a mistake. 143 full days
43.
and 6 half blended. And so,
About that.
so this is just something I was looking at as we met with those other superintendents. They said a few things that they offered were some tutoring on Fridays. This is not even including the tutoring, but this would be a contact day for students. So let me just pull up the thought behind this. And again, this is just a draft. I have a couple options for parent-teacher conference on this draft. This would be fine-tuned. Actually, that might even be more. I'll have to double check and see my numbers on this one here because with that, but what that could look like is like the 12th of November. It's a Friday. And so as we develop this proposal, it's not intended to say every Friday is off, but most of them will be. So if we're 2 weeks away from the end of the trimester, as one way to offer help for kids that may be struggling, you get to November 11th, the students that are on track would be given an assignment to work on the next day at home on the 12th. Or they could be given the assignment, and if a parent really wanted to go to school, they still could. But the 12th would be a half day of 4 hours of instruction that take place at school. Buses would run as normal. Kids would get on the bus, they would come, they'd have shortened periods here at the school where they're there for 40 minutes in each class period. Or if they only had 1 or 2 classes to work on, they could check into the one class, go talk to another teacher, and come back and work multiple class periods for one teacher. So a blended early out just allows us one more option. We tried that this year. That will be more effective if it's in a calendar up front for everybody to know about it from the get-go. I think our blended experiment that we did before Thanksgiving this year, the 1 day would have been sufficient. I think 2 days was a lot, just as I looked at that.
They're quite close together too.
They would be put that way to help have a push for the kids. And we could
For
move
the end
that,
of the
Yeah, to
trimester.
finish the trimester off strong.
we could move that 12th back a year too. They are
To catch them before they get too.
to the end of the trimester.
Yeah, what, you want that a little earlier to catch them sooner?
You could,
If they needed a little extra help.
yeah, we could. We could put it on the 5th even, that might be a pretty good balance of it as well. Those things are all up, but
Okay, so when you have teachers come in on that Friday to help with blended learning,
Mhm.
that's not a contract day for them.
No, it would
So
be. It would be.
it would be,
It's a contract day.
oh, it is a contract day. Okay.
But they
So-
would just be allowed to just work half the day? Is that right? Or would it be a
No.
full day?
It would
It'd
be
be a full day for the
it'd
teachers.
be a full contract day for the teachers.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, so would any of these teacher professional days.
Because once we discussed just having them come in and paying them to,
So that would
but I
be.
like this a lot better.
So we still could do both. So what the others would look like is I could go to the teachers and say, outside of your contract, on a non-contract day, we are offering to pay you a stipend to a certain set amount of money per hour to come in and offer tutoring to students. And then that would be when where buses wouldn't run. Parents could bring kids in on a Friday.
Does that run contrary to that policy that says you can't use the school building for your personal gain.
It would be part of the school setting it up. We're the ones doing it. It's not a personal gain. So that would be if a teacher said, I want the parent to pay me. But if I'm paying the teacher from the district,
Oh,
would be okay. But if a teacher said, hey, on those Fridays, I want you to come and if Andrea's the parent, Andrea's taking out of her pocket and paying the teacher to be there, now that would run contrary
Yeah.
to it.
okay, so you're the school is gonna pay them, so we have
Yes.
to have some funds for that.
And that would come from a fund such as Title I or another fund that would allow us, it's allows us extra. We could use literacy money for K through 3 on something like that. So I don't know exactly where that's at. I did some rough numbers on it. It would probably cost the district about $6,000 to have 3 or 4 teachers do that throughout the year. If they did it every single non-contract Friday,
Mhm.
So it would be better for us to put them in as contract days.
I think so. It'd be
Yeah.
more organized that way. We still could look at it and experiment with 1 or 2 teachers doing a Friday.
So on those blended learning days, what kind of a population are we getting here? Half,
What
four,
percentage?
what?
I think it would probably be less than 25%. But it allows those kids that are most needy to come in and do it. Those other kids would be at home, still required to do work, so it still count as a day in school for them. The teachers would just have to take roll by looking at the assignments that are completed. But I think these all come because this proposal is not to try to save money. It's not just to try to make a calendar. We're really thinking about how do we still provide support for the most needy kids. You know, it's different. It's not the traditional
Well,
model. Like,
I certainly like this a lot better than, so this still offers 10 days that kids are home extra than what
Yeah.
the other.
yeah, this one's a little bit more, and I could just
Well,
count it
Is
right
there
now.
any benefit to having some of those blended days in September and October?
During part of it is like September and October. Are you talking about like the 7th and 8th on the harvest? So people might ask, well, why are you only, if we're a 4-day week, we still have 9 days basically that are offered towards a harvest break, or 10 days if you take the Fridays, because those are all days that still can be worked.
Right.
There's nothing that says you have to have a full 2-week block. It can be mixed around, and we can't predict the weather. We don't know. Like even when we had that early one 2 years ago, that hard frost came way early, and so with the 7th and 8th as days coming back into school, you can see that yes, that's a Friday where we're going to require kids to
Right.
come to school. I had played with the idea of having that be a shortened day, but what happens is we just don't have enough time built in
Mhm.
to give us the required amount for the trimester if we wanted to end the trimester on the 23rd. It just,
So we couldn't make, say, the 3rd of September a blended,
you could.
or is that too soon after school started? Maybe it's not needed yet.
Yeah, that's kind of
Probably
what I
not
was thinking.
needed.
That's what I was
That's,
kind of thinking. It's just too early.
Yeah.
You know, the other thought I had, and I haven't ran this by anybody with administration or teachers yet. I'm curious on what parents, and you have 2 parents on the board, if parent-teacher conference was just Friday. It's a day that kids aren't in school. It's a contract day for the teachers. We're not cutting out a day of instruction for it.
Well, then your teachers aren't having to have that late night and then be here the next morning.
Yeah.
I think it's a great idea.
But what about parents at work?
So what we could do on that is offer at 2 different times.
Mhm. We have to give them some kind of option.
Well, so you're gonna have to do something at night.
At nighttime.
Yeah,
But then they're not having to come to work the next day.
yeah.
They're just, even if it's still,
Because I could break down some of these and just do a Thursday night after school and have one evening, take the 4 hours approximately that the teachers have and count that as a half contract day. that's something that we could look at.
You could do a couple of hours Thursday evening, and then you have Friday for the majority of your conferences.
Would you make Thursday by appointment only instead of requiring them to stay and have no one come?
Yeah, that's a, elementary, they always come.
Yeah.
I guess there are other things to be working on while you're waiting.
Yeah.
until they come.
So those are just some ideas. I know that when I'm looking at this calendar here, and it has the different days on the sides, one on the left-hand side and on the far right side would be teacher contract days. The ones on the inside are the student days per trimester. So I'm gonna have to go back and just make sure, double check on all of these, because just a disclaimer, these are approximate, because as I work at it back and forth, I think that's the biggest thing as we look at it with, there's certain things that take away from the teacher with the with their subject areas in secondary. If we took away the mentoring and put it right into it, yeah, it extends their time, but is it the best? And I like what we're doing.
On the 4-day, how long are the class hours?
Good question. Let me pull up. I'm gonna stop share for just a second. Let me pull up, again, these are just ones that I'm working through. All right. I'm gonna go back to share. So Andrea, your question is how long are the class periods? So this would be, and you can see from the one that I handed out. That one. You can see from here that the start time, at least from what I'm looking at, would be the same for both schools. Hamer would start at 7:45. They're starting at 7:45 right now. And so it wouldn't be earlier. Tarleton can start at 8:10. Whereas right now they're starting at 8:10, so there's no change on there. So class periods, to get that extra 30 minutes, we're just adding 5 minutes to each class. I go back over to the comparison page. So this is an example of a class period starting at 8:10, ending at 9:15. This is exactly how we do our schedule now, where we have 7 minutes of what we call intervention to help with to allow for the breakfast break for the high school and secondary. That's how we add it in there.
So Shane, do you believe that adding 5 minutes to a class period is as valuable to a student as having a full class period on a Friday?
That's the $1 million question, isn't it?
Yeah, see, that's what we're trying to decide.
And it is. Where,
What I mean is that,
because if we're saying that, let's just take West Jefferson for the last 5 years. Are there things that maybe our students, like what we should be saying is our kids should be the top everywhere because they've had that opportunity. How I'm gonna answer it is what the research has shown it, just because it's going back to if you're looking at preference, I can see both sides. But if you're looking at, I can see that, yeah, it doesn't really matter.
that might be why a teacher says, I'm not gonna be able to teach everything and that I want to teach.
Right.
And your answer for that is, well, we just need to teach those
Priority standards.
those priority standards that, and we have to learn a new way.
Because when kids go to their first year of college, why is it that my history classes I took in college were the exact same as high school? Why is it that they're teaching the same thing all the way up? And somehow we have this perception that we are going to make them master it at all times. And I just don't think it works that way. And so we're trying to find this, I don't know, this educational panacea that's perfect for them. And I don't know, on one hand, if that Friday is so valuable, why were we a failing school, according to the state, in a 5-day setting? I'm not saying that was the reason why, but if you're looking at it,
I believe it was because we didn't have all these other things in place that we had in
Yeah, we,
that we have in place
which
now.
I don't disagree with you.
we added programs that helped.
So if the research right now is showing that it really doesn't matter on the schedule,
Mhm.
that extra day.
To me, it almost seems laughable to add 5 minutes to every class. It just seems like
You don't think there's
we ought
enough
to go
gain?
home early. We ought to just not have.
Did we
the
have
hours.
enough time before?
Well, I'm sure we didn't, but I'm.
See, again, so like, if we didn't have enough time before, were we trying to teach too much?
I'm not trying to be anti anything. I'm just.
No, this is good discussion because just,
Because I see the value of both ways. I'm just, I see that 4-day is not such a bad creature. But I also, for the kids, trade a Friday of learning or remediation or relearning. Trade that for a day of nothing. More video games, more.
for some.
Yeah.
For some,
For so many. And being alone.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I just
Some-
have to state that. I have to state that before.
So have we heard this year that those Fridays were taken off for professional development have been a huge issue for parents?
I have not heard that.
I haven't either.
But we don't know. But nobody's here complaining.
No. I haven't. I've actually heard people say we really like that Friday for family reasons. But I haven't heard people come in and say, you've put me in a really hard situation because it's 12 days on those Fridays and maybe it's because the calendar before had that many days off anyway for the elementary, but their babysitters weren't home because they were here at school because 6th on up was here. I think that's what makes this decision in some ways difficult is because we don't know. We're looking to do something that's never been done here. And as we compare it to other districts that have done it, who have generally said it's been positive for them, maybe one could look at that, Nedra, and say, does 5 days of instruction, even if it is like 5 minutes more, whether you say if it's laughable or not, that's not always the amount, but it's the quality of the instruction
I agree.
that
I
matters.
agree, but your instruction, your teacher isn't gonna all of a sudden change and be a wonderful teacher just because
It's 4 days.
it's 4 days. You're still gonna be the same teacher.
Yeah.
And so I think the professional development is an important part of this. And that took me a little while to see that was important to change those days of school for professional development days. Now, when we take away all the other days, I really get nervous, but I respect the way everybody else feels about it.
Yeah.
The comment's been made previously that we have to listen to our constituents.
I
And that's
agree,
why we
I
don't,
agree.
that's why we don't modify the harvest break, because that has
Right.
been discussed.
That's right. I
And we
agree.
do let our
The
constituents.
problem is I have constituents that are both ways.
Right.
Oh,
But what did the survey results come back? The majority said
They did.
they
they would
wanted
be
it.
opposed to a 4-day. And if we were
They
truly
did,
listening.
but it's just
to
like
this
cell phones.
constituents,
Sometimes you have to save people from themselves.
So when do we choose that? Because that's exactly what our government officials say in Washington DC. They're saving us from
Yeah.
ourselves.
Yeah.
Oh, now you're saying I'm one of those.
No, I'm just saying.
You're opening a can of worms.
I did that on purpose.
Yeah, sure.
Somebody ever listens to this
He
whole
knows I can
thing.
take it.
That's hard though. That it is. It's hard, but that's the whole reason that guided me to this was the constituents.
I know.
And coming in, I wasn't here. Yeah, I lived here in the community, but I wasn't involved in any of the decision-making processes. And I can remember last time filling out the survey for West Jefferson and at that point, I was thinking, you know, the 5 days probably a little bit better. That's what we're here, but it's not like we're making this decision we're not the first wave of making this
No.
decision. And if the board goes in this direction, we're putting in things into place that everybody else says, oh, I wish I would have done that. I wish I would have done that. And I don't, you know, on one hand, I'm thinking, okay, if we take away those Fridays, if those Fridays were all used for quality instruction, and I'm not saying that they're not right now, and there was not wasted time, and kids were just in and engaged the whole time, I think you could make the argument to say, yeah, it is. But I'm wondering if by the end of that time, our students' minds, yeah, it's going to be a little bit longer day by 5 minutes per period, which is going to be 30 minutes. Yeah, they might be done. But after you've been going to school for 5 days in a row, then you have a busy Saturday, and then, you know, like families are busy all the time too. There's not a downtime either. And so that's why I think people that have been in this type of calendar like it, because it allows the families to decompress a little bit. And on one hand, you could say, all right, as a student, I'm going to push it hard. Friday comes, I can just relax a little bit. I can do my homework. Yeah, some of them might jump on the video games, but those same kids are jumping on the video games on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And we can't save them. We can't, and they've turned out all right, but we can't save them from what they do at home.
And that's not the school's responsibility, what they do at home, that's the parents' responsibility.
On one hand, but then I'm going to go back to Nedra to go on both sides. Well, what if they don't have anybody at home on those days? That's a fair point.
It is, but they wouldn't have anybody at home during a 2-week harvest break either.
True.
Well, one thought
And we do that.
So, and we do that and nobody has any problem with that.
One thought I've had is, you know, we were concerned that childcare costs might go up because they'd have to have someone watch their kid on Friday. But because school's going longer, they might not have to have childcare Monday through Thursday like they normally would. And so the childcare cost could potentially be a wash.
Just a little bit.
Maybe people feel more at ease leaving their kids for an hour after school alone than they would a full day.
Yeah.
Just saying.
I don't know, from looking at this on the last part of the handout, taking in, and these come right from the State Departments. When I put a calendar together, I need to put the total amount of contact time, and all of these did include the 22 hours of professional development that's allowable to go in. This is basically what we'll put together to send into the State Department as they track. And so you have the different grade levels, the regular hours per day, the total hours. This is from 2 years ago. And what that does is it comes down with how many extra days are built in. This is important for us to know. So if we have a snow day, so 2 years ago, we went right to the limit on this. And I think we had 5 emergency closures, which meant our seniors had 0.3 days of cushion. By adding the 15 minutes into the schedule like we did for this year, when we looked at it, we actually had a lot of extra cushion built in all the way across. So So then even though we built in the cushion, one can still make the argument like Nedra, well, does 15 minutes really change the quality of instruction from 2 years ago to this year? Maybe, maybe not, but what it is we're still making a decision that's based on what the regulations are for the state. Now, these would drop if the board does choose to go to a 4-day calendar, but they would be more, this is the estimates moving forward. So comparing to the 1920, we're 2 extra days. And then that's what's on this right here. So basically, this year's calendar with the extra time that was built in, pushed it up to 9 more days than what it was 2 years ago. If the 4-day proposal is voted on, we still have 2 days more and 3 days more in first grade through kindergarten than we did 2 years ago. So that's what's, and you're thinking, well, but it might be less for some subject areas, but we are still meeting the total amount for the state.
So for K3, are you gonna have an afternoon treat or something to wake them up?
We already do have.
We already do have.
We
an
already
afternoon
have.
treat.
We do have afternoon treats. By if we did go to the longer school day, I'm going to go back to this one and look at the sample schedule. The lunch for secondary would be pushed back to 12:45, 40:46, which will allow us to push our elementary time back. I know that's really small for
So
you.
kids are gonna have more time to eat.
Not more time, it's the
Just
same.
later in the morning.
They just won't go in at 10:50.
Yeah, and
Elementary will be able to go in later, so
they have how much time to eat? Half hour?
they'll have, the elementaries actually have 45
40
minutes.
45 minutes, wow.
So they'll still have about 20 minutes to eat in the lunchroom. That's not gonna change this. I was talking with our capacity builders. She's joking, but kind of serious. There are 2 or 3 things that rule the governance of the school district. It's not the superintendent, it's not the school board. She said transportation, how many buses you have, and your lunch schedule are the 2 things that really drive. And in a way, you're looking at this with elementary. If we were a district that had, let's say Territon Elementary was out in Mud Lake or somewhere, and it was off campus here, like Hamer's is, we would have to have busing systems for all 3 of them. And you would probably have to say, when does this school start? Well, when can the buses get there? And we do that already. And one of the reasons why Territon Elementary will go longer in the day than Hamer is because Hamer can start with 1 or 2 buses and go. As one bus comes this way, they come and start down here. There's no sense of us ending school. We could end school for the elementary if we really wanted to. If we wanted to look at the start and end times for the elementary, we could probably end the elementary at 8:45, or 3:45, which doesn't seem too much longer, and still meet the minimum requirement hours. But what are those kids going to do for 15 minutes?
Yeah.
Some,
Might as well be in school.
they might as well
Fill
still
the
be in
time.
school.
They won't get hurt as easily.
Yeah. So those are some of the things, I don't know. I just wanted to share that with the board. Other questions, concerns, I know I didn't have an answer for some of those pros and cons, Nedra, because I don't know if there's a right or wrong answer
Okay.
on some of them.
On the hybrid, you have a back to school open house.
Yeah, again,
Is it
that's,
just left off on the 4-day, or you're not planning to do one?
No time.
I was looking at, we could do it on the Friday before. Or we could do it that Monday afterwards. There's a lot of different things we could look at. We could maybe start the school year with a half day. I don't know, there's a lot of different things. Initially, I just wanted to make sure that whatever we work with, that if the board does choose for the 4-day option, that I don't come back a month later and say, oops, we didn't have enough days built into this. I wanted to make sure that could it really work? And that's why there's been more detail put into the 4-day than the hybrid option, because the hybrid option is basically just what we're doing this year. I know it will work.
Right.
So that's,
Do you have a Wednesday on your 5 days?
I do.
They're out. Why is that?
I do have that. That could be adjusted one way or another. Initially, I was looking at 54 days per trimester, just trying to find a balance from the start and end time. And when you look at the, if we tried to end by the 23rd, that cuts your first trimester down to 50 days instead of 54. I did put the professional work day in the middle of the week. At the end of a trimester, it's nice to give teachers a chance to just get the grades in, be focused and go. Whereas with the 4-day option, the early out would essentially give the same thing. If students were there until 1 o'clock, teachers still could be able to have some time to finish inputting grades as well. That was just the thought behind that. But again, the total days could be adjusted even on the hybrid. If we look that way.
And on both of them, I see spring break is 3 days instead of 5.
The reason why on the hybrid is I wanted to finish before Memorial Day. If we want to, we can easily extend spring break, but go after Memorial Day. And I don't
know if parents want to do that.
The biggest
They don't.
The biggest thing
They
for
don't.
the week-long spring break that I've heard is mostly because of when the high school does do a trip. My personal thought with that, if the kids are all going on a trip, they're already given a number of days to be absent. And they also are given mentoring hour to work and catch up on things. And so that's where I think,
Well, it's not school sponsored.
it's not school sponsored, even though it could be said it's school facilitated if we do that. So I can see why they've done it that way. I don't want to become one of those older folks that said, well, back when I was in school, that's what we did. I went on the American Heritage and I missed a couple days of school. And I was able to finish up my assignments and get it in. Everybody that went on the trip also did. It's something that I don't think we need to have that be the only reason why we have a week long. The second one that I heard for a week long spring break where some of the teachers were saying, I just really need that time to recoup. But if we have built in, if it's a 4-day calendar, you have that built
What's to
in.
recruit from?
What's April 4th?
On the 4-day or the hybrid?
The 4-day.
April 4th would just be the last day of spring break.
Oh, gotcha.
So that would be, and that's why we slide that. We could have come back on the Monday and had the 8th off as an option. But by putting that on a Monday, it allows it to have one extra day.
Gotcha.
The spring break for the third trimester, I could move it up a week or I could move it back a week. It doesn't really matter to me. I guess
That's a
that-
good week, right there.
You like that?
Mhm. When's Easter?
This year it's the first Sunday of April.
Is it the
I don't
first?
know what it is next year.
When is Easter?
We're checking in with Siri. Let's see what she.
Easter is on Sunday, April 4th, 2021.
So we need 22.
So
When is
April
Easter
4th.
in 2022?
Easter is on Sunday, April 17th, 2022.
it's the third Sunday.
Ooh,
So that's right, move back.
Way down, yeah.
we never know.
I should move it back a week just so it's on my birthday,
When is that?
the 9th.
The ninth?
Well, it's after daylight savings. So
Yeah, and that could be a nice controversy that people Mr. Williams only puts the schedule together for his birthday.
I think it's important.
Oh, goodness.
Mine's a 6th, so we could have a double celebration.
There you go.
So, I don't know, I'm curious, I haven't talked with any of the teachers that have been to, that are on a 4-day, like in our conference, like for their salmon. I know that from our last meeting, at PAW meeting, one of the patrons brought up that she's an acquaintance with a teacher who went to salmon when they went to the 4-day, and that teacher didn't like it. And, you know, because the question came up is, well, Shane, you're only bringing in people that like it, and not anybody that doesn't like it. And I asked her about, you know, just some follow-up questions. I said, well, what was the reason why salmon went to it in the first place? It was financial.
Mhm.
So they didn't have any teacher professional days built into it. They didn't look at tutoring or blended opportunities with it. And so, and if they didn't like it, did they have RTI and mentoring type things built into the schedules? I don't think any of them did.
But to be fair, I think we have discussed both sides.
I think we have to.
Just because we haven't brought anybody in, who would you bring in?
How do you offset the time that you would normally pay someone working on a Friday? Like your lunchroom or your bus drivers, how do you offset their pay?
So what we'd have to do is look at where they're at right now and what they're getting. There might be some departments that will take an hourly hit overall. The difference would be between, am I working 35 hours a week or 32 hours a week, or vice
Don't they
versa?
work the same hours, just in 4 days, though?
Not all departments. Some could. It just depends on what the job description is.
I guess your bus drivers would have longer, well,
Yeah,
they wouldn't really have a longer route, it would just change the time in which that route leaves from the school.
right.
So,
So one thing with bus drivers specifically, and this would be for those bus drivers, because not all bus routes push a bus driver into 20 hours. And we don't provide any health benefits for any bus driver. None of them are over 30 hours on a 5-day week. But they do qualify for PERSI benefits, which that's a big deal. And again, the purpose for this proposal is to not like pinch pennies and try to save. Because that's one thing as I've talked with other people, they say, well, don't tell us you're gonna save a lot of money. No, I haven't once come in here and said to the board, the reason why we're going here is to save money. Now, if we can save some money, that's not a bad thing, but that's not the intention. So I would, if the board does go to a 4-day, I would propose and look into ways to allow bus drivers to work in a different capacity for a time enough to get them back up to make sure they don't lose their PERSI benefits. I think that's the only thing fair, and it's actually something that can encourage bus drivers to come if that's the main reason why they are even driving in the first place. Does that answer the question? But we can't just give them PERSI benefits if they don't work it somewhere else.
right.
Some of that could look like whether they come in and work as an aide, or they are supervising or helping a teacher with something in the classroom.
At least give the opportunity,
Yes.
whether or not they take it, that's their
Correct.
choice.
Because we can't just say, yeah, we moved here and we're gonna magically pay you for something that you're not doing.
They clean buses.
They could extend that where it's just something a little bit
Clean
more.
your buses.
Okay.
Other concerns or thoughts on that?
How about with the cooks? Any
Longer-
effects on the cooks?
Work longer days.
We work a little bit longer on some of the days, but I think they're Fridays.
So I mean, the hours would
I think
Be-
that's the one
be close.
department I think it would be a little less.
It would be less.
But they have lunches scattered out further than longer
do.
than they did before, so wouldn't that compensate?
They do. And that's another thing is we've had conversations on lunchrooms and home cooked meals. And I had other thoughts on that. When, besides just the regulations that are put on, we haven't always served breakfast in the district. And I know that's been a topic of controversy over the course of that action of when it came in. But because of that program, it does allow, we have 50% of our kids that qualify for free and reduced lunch. That's half of our kids that have an opportunity. But it also benefits the district to run that program and has helped the lunchroom go from a $38,000 deficit to running in the black.
Because we got those additional federal funds,
Grants.
right?
Yes, you're using that federal fund. But because you serve breakfast, that takes up time in the morning where you can't just hit the ground running to start preparing everything from scratch. And by the time you finish up with breakfast, it's 9:30, 10 o'clock.
Mhm.
Then you gotta turn around and hurry and get it ready. So it's just not that simple to think, well, why can't it be run like this? If I was gonna go to mom and pop's kitchen and do that, and then they go right from that to afternoon snack. And so but I think that department will have potentially a cut in hours based on that. I'm sure we could look at other options on a case-by-case situation if they could work in other departments. The custodial, you can make the argument that the custodial could probably keep the same hours that they have now and just clean on the different days or extend their hours, and there's just different things that.
They can do a lot of things on Friday that they can't do when kids are here. That sounds like a great idea.
It actually would be beneficial for that group.
So do we need to come to a consensus, or do we just?
No consensus. This is just discussion and asking questions, and
When will this be voted on?
yeah, I'll visit with Tanis, and I would like to put it on this month's board meeting next week. Of course, Tanis always has the board chair to say to put it on there or not. But that would allow us to just decide, not on the final one, it wouldn't finalize this, it would just give me the direction to say, this is the calendar or this is the calendar. And then what I can do between the January meeting and the February meeting is put together the final details of it to have the approved calendar be in place at the board meeting in February. We could put on there a 3-year calendar limit to try it. I know that there's been some people that have asked, well, how will you know if the board doesn't go to the 4-day? Do we have any criteria in place to say this worked or this didn't? And really the only thing that we could really look at are standardized tests initially. Parent feedback would be another one on that.
Why do you like locking in 3 years?
Partly just so I can focus more on policy things, so this doesn't dominate
Well,
the
then you can
discussion.
probably really tell, because you probably can't tell after the first year. Because that's when things are all new, and if you give it a trial period, a set trial period, then maybe you can really analyze it over that time.
And you're into it pretty deep, and it's hard to turn back.
So I have a question.
It is, let me, before you hold that
No, it
question.
has to do with this.
Okay,
So if you voted for a 3-year calendar, if in a year the board decided this doesn't work, could they come back and say, we want to change it?
but it would have to be a board vote.
Right. But
Like what we
so
So-
you can vote for a 3-year calendar, but then you could still come back and say.
You always have the right to come out, but it would have to come out by a board vote.
Yeah.
And so that way, on one hand, if one board member has really strong feelings one way or another, it's not just that board member that says, hey, Shane, put this on the thing. It's not just, the board chair that's saying, put it on or keep it off. You could still come in and say, I think we need to revisit this. And so then we would vote on whether we revisit it. And that's really what the discussion would be. Do we really want to open this up or do we not? Do we want to keep going? And if the board voted to open it back up, then we jump back to it. But if we, we're not going to vote on a 3-year decision this month. It's just going to be the initial step to see which way we're going. But the point about you're in it so far, possibly, I don't know, but I can also see that, how do we really know
Right.
what?
How you've gone through several years.
Good discussion.
Very good discussion.
Health insurance.
So we've been looking into a way that we can reduce the health insurance cost to the district. I looked at the master agreement for the teachers, and I'll need to visit with Mr. Hall, which I haven't as part of this meeting. We'll be talking to him today. The master agreement indicates that if there's changes in health insurance, that the Teachers Association would basically be in agreement with the board with that. And so with our current rates with Blue Cross, and I'll just pull this up, and I do have this sheet. Just take it and pass it down. Yeah.
Keeps going up.
So this year, and this was the 8% increase that we had, the $834. So Blue Cross increased rates by 8% over the last year, which we're at $834. The hard part about this is I know of districts that are paying $580 for the exact same coverage that we have. What it comes down to is they take our pool of teachers and they take the risk level. So they basically say we have some unhealthy and high risk individuals within our 64 people who get insurance here at West Jefferson. And so that's why the insurance rates are what they are. So the only way to renegotiate is to drop our current provider and find somebody else the best rate we could get for the exact same coverage. And that was the thing that we talked to Rudy about, is if we're even going to consider this, it has to be the exact same coverage that we have, just from a different name and company.
Or better.
Or better. And there's actually,
There are some benefits.
there are some benefits that are better than it. But it would give us the savings of $43, $44 per employee. So for the remainder of the year, it would be right around $30,000 that we would save for the rest of this year. Now, the benefit of this is it would lock in for 2 years in a row, and we're anticipating a 5% increase. It might be 3%, it might be 8%. We don't know. So it could be, the savings could be a little bit less than this. So what they do is, if this was Blue Cross that we currently have, an increase of 5% would put us up to there. So that's where they're getting the potential savings for the next year. Again, going back to the Teachers Association would need to look at this to see if they would even entertain the idea of it. Because as of right now, this does not impact the bottom line of our teachers. This only impacts the bottom line of the district, because we currently pay for all of the required amount for the teachers.
Would it be reasonable to say if they wouldn't go for it, that they would have to stand the cost of the extra?
That would be something that would be discussed during negotiations in April. And I don't think we want to come in and use that as a threat.
Or maybe just as a reality?
Because we were lucky this last year to assume an 8% increase. And I know that they, at least Mr. Hall, verbalized on how grateful he was for the district to be able to do that. One thing that this could start, so this is what the process would be. I'm gonna meet with the Teachers Association or Mr. Hall. He'll be able to bring it up to the Teachers Association. We've already invited Bree Ballard to come out on Friday. He'll be able to answer questions to the teachers on what that would look like. 'Cause that's really what they need to know is how would this impact me now? How it was explained to me in the meeting that Patty and I had with Rudy is basically this first month, we are on Blue Cross still. So if I started already paying towards my deductible, that transfers from Blue Cross to the new one. And so it doesn't restart it. So really there's probably some paperwork issues that people would have. But like if I went and had a procedure done this month, I can't be going, oh, I can never do this because I already paid $1,000 towards my deductible here. It will transfer over for it. And so we would still use Blue Cross for dental like we are, but this would pick up the health portion. But as we look at the budget, I know like from my perspective, I'd be like, yeah, let's do this. It's just gonna be, I'm not sure how the teachers are going to respond to this because yes, they will be changing cards. They'll have to contact their doctors and say, I have a different medical carrier. But if we could save, let's say that was only 80,000, it was a little bit lower. Like 80,000 is a lot, it's
It's a lot in
significant
this district.
for this district where for those 2 years. You
So
know,
does Rudy have a carrier in mind that's gonna pick it up?
this is based off of a quote from
From-
the other carrier.
Okay,
And the quotes are on it. So really it just comes down to what the teachers will do. If the teachers are agreeable to this is something that will come back to the board or in board meeting and make that decision then.
And of course, they accept pre-existing conditions.
And I think that's a requirement for all policies.
So they did have all of us on health insurance fill out a health survey. So this new carrier has the information as to what our
Our survey.
people already have.
So do they ever go to that insurance company and say, we're gonna leave you if you don't lower your rates, and they
And that's what we're doing right now to
just
yeah, I bet other districts are doing that too, right?
some have, but it's interesting because other districts that have Blue Cross right now are only paying $580 to $630 per employee. And that's, so the question came up, well, have we looked into, there was discussion in years past that this would allow us to, or discussion that we could go to a state that put us all into a big pot, but that doesn't look like it's going to go any further.
too bad.
So I'm not proposing any, I would like our teachers to do this, but again, it goes back down to what their comfort level is. If they don't, we would have to bring up the discussion to say, this is something that as our business manager and superintendent look into, try to find ways that still provide you with insurance. We might be able to, if they choose not to go into it now, we still might be able to make a change like this in the summer, but we just lose the months of being able to save. That's really what it comes down to. So I just wanted to give the board the heads up that the discussion will be taking place with the Teachers Association. And
So basically it'll be more their decision on what they wanna do. If they're
And
comfortable with
for
changing
making a
carriers.
change, for making a change in the middle of the year, yes.
Yeah,
If
they might wanna say, well, let's start the new program at the beginning of
And-
the next school year.
And they might, and that's where really to be able to make a change in the middle of the year, both sides have to be in agreement. If it's something that the board wants to push towards more, if it doesn't happen now, we want to push towards it in negotiations, then that's what we'll come to negotiations and say, this is the carrier we're going to go to as we start the new year. So good questions. That's all I have
Do you anticipate a decision from this today?
from the teachers union. I'm thinking Friday will be the day. Because that will, like I said, Mr. Hall will need to call a meeting with the teachers, explain to say this is what the board meant. That's why I wanted to have this be a public meeting to say, this is the first you guys are hearing about it. It's not any secret. We're not trying to, it's just an option that is proposed. But then by Friday, they'll be able to probably come to an idea.
And finally,
That-
superintendent evaluation.
Just, see if you have any questions. Just as a reminder, 5 o'clock, we'll meet earlier on the next board meeting. So you guys can start executive session. And
Yeah, it's 5 o'clock on, what's the number thing?
It's the 21st,
21st?
Thursday.
Thursday, we'll start that, and then I'll present to you the employment changes and everything, and then I will excuse myself from that meeting. Then we finish off the evaluation. That's,
Do we have a copy of last year's?
I
We
think
will
so.
get that for you.
All right. Sounds good. Anybody have anything else?
Oh, I forgot to ask Mr. Hadley when he's in here, have they been spending on the hay fundraiser? And I know Nedra's requested like an itemization of what they're spending.
I haven't yet this year.
The only thing with the hay fundraiser that I know they spent on were the uniforms.
They spent some money on some
I
uniforms,
noticed it's gone way down.
And that's,
so they have spent,
and that was from the last board meeting,
Right,
that
but
Nedra
I
asked
did
that
ask
question in the last board meeting on why there was a big reduction in uniforms.
uniforms.
Will the floor be open for a motion to adjourn then?
Madam Chair, I move that we adjourn this meeting.
I'll second that, Madam Chair.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Super.
How are our sports teams doing, Shane?